Welcome to the FA Vlog.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Easy Does It. Thanks for joining. If you've clicked on this, you know we're going to be talking about FA Almond. And as we normally do, we go into market share, then we go on to single flavor testing, and then talk about its applications. So Richard, you can kick it off with market share there.
Yeah, right. FA Almond, one of the staple flavors. This comes in at number 43 in ATF's top 100. It's one of only 3 nuts in the top 100, with FW hazelnut above it at position 17 and TFA peanut butter below it, somewhere in the 70s, I think. Anyway, let's start with ELR's stats on it. FA Almond used in 27,816 recipes. The other almond, just plain almond, which registers on ELR, is TFA's almond, which is used in 1,197 recipes. So in terms of just a plain almond flavor, FA is miles out in front. However, we then have the toasted almond sector, which is now a different flavor, but it is still in that thematic zone of almond. And there we've got TFA toasted almond at 19,794, which is about 2/3 of FA almond, and cap toasted almond at 3,837. There's one other one of note, and that's Wonder Flavors almond cookie, which is in at 427 recipes. Moving across to ATF, again with the same flavors, FA Almond is in 3,030 recipes, TFA Almond only in 29. So again, if you're looking for a flat almond flavor, this is about as close to a monopoly as you're going to get. TFA Toasted Almond weighs in with 625, Cap Toasted Almond with 198, and Wonder Flavors Almond Cookie at 72. Now, all 5 of these flavors are used in the 1 to 2% range, mostly around the low 1, like 1.1 to 1.3, 1.4%. So that's pretty much the universal norm for almond flavors. There was one interesting statistical quirk between the 2 sites, and that is that on ELR, TFA toasted almond, as I said, was about 2/3 as much as FA almond. But if we move across to ATF, FA almond is roughly 5 times as much as TFA toasted almond. So that's quite a big swing there. TFA toasted almond much more popular relative to FA almond on ELR than it is on ATF. So that's quite interesting, but overall the message is very clear that if you want a plain almond flavor, really it's essentially a monopoly for FA almond, which of course is good news for DIYers who are just starting out and are trying to build a decent flavor stash with as few flavors as possible, because it means that in terms of the 2 most popular and serviceable nuts of all, which is almond and hazelnut, you can get FW hazelnut and FA almond, and you're basically good to go. You might want to get TFA toasted almond if you want, that extra aspect of a toasted almond, but really those are the 3 flavors that I would say that you need in the almond and hazelnut sector. Right, let's get over to the notes.
Yeah, so I'm actually quite happy that we decided to add notes to Easy Does It, because this is something I probably would have never single flavor tested and just go and read about it online. But yeah, it forces me to do some single flavor testing. I started out on 0.5 with this one because, of course, it says on ATF that most people are using it at 1%. So I thought I'd start a little bit lower. I went up to 2%. So I started at 0.5. All I could really taste was a bit of sweetness and the kind of taste that's left in your mouth after you finished eating an almond, right? So maybe if you want like almond flakes, you would start using it at about 0.5%, so that it's just a slight nuance. The strange thing about almonds itself in the real world is that it doesn't have much of a flavor punch. If you think about eating an almond, you have this, just like a slight flavor that's in your mouth. If you think about eating a peanut, it's got a lot more flavor than what an almond would have, even in the real life. And that's kind of what I'm getting with this FA Almond. So it's extremely realistic in that sense. At 1%, I was getting, a lot more sweetness from it. So this is definitely a sweet nut. The almond flavor was a lot more prominent. I wasn't getting a lot of creaminess from it at 1%. However, there is some body to it, right, at 1%. So it felt a little bit fuller from a vape perspective. The mouthfeel wasn't bad, so the experience was a little bit more body to it. That's what I'm trying to say. At 2%, nothing really changes for me from 1%. So the only thing that I can say at 2%, it felt a little bit more creamy. So that was the only change. And then potentially a slight harshness that I was starting to get at about 2%. That could just be me though. I know that my throat is a little bit sensy, and I pick up things a lot sooner from a harshness perspective. So yeah, that's kind of what I got. Daniel, do you want to kick off some of the applications, maybe how you've used it?
So for me, it's got like a fatty quality to it. Like all almond should, like it's got a very fatty quality, so it works well with dairies. So in something like a strawberry and cream or a milkshake, it adds quite a like fatty feeling to it, as well as like a malt, and you also get a bit of that almond milk feeling to it. But some of the notes that I've read before, and I tend to agree with it, is it's a lot of a bakery almond as well. So it's used in macaroons mostly. I think most recipes, probably half of the 3,030 on ATF are macaroon recipes if I go look. And I usually use it with ID10T's macaroon base, which is sugar cookie, at like 4% and then 2% almond. And you get a pretty good macaroon base for anything. And then you can just put your filling in. So I use it for that. And then cereals as well. If you want like almond milk or like just want to up your cereals a bit, then you can add almond in. And that'll help just elevate the cereal or create like an effect of an almond milk in it. It's not a very potent flavor. So I use it anywhere from 1 to 2%. And then it's over to Liam.
The main way I've actually used this was obvious as an actual almond flavor itself. I used it with a little bit of TFA sweet raspberry, some FA beryl, and then FA meringue to actually create almond raspberry meringue. But because I was doing this show, I thought I'd have a little look at all the recipes that are going on and see how other people are actually using it. And one of the more interesting uses I saw for it was by the Juice Fairy. She actually uses it in the pastry puff recipe on all the flavors, very, very low at 0.05%, to actually give a separation to between a frosting and a puff pastry note, to stop it from all blending in together, which I thought was quite unique. I've never actually seen that used before. One of the other ways that you could use it is if you could take it right up to 2% and use that very slight bitter harshness that you got, Theo, add a little bit of FA bergamot to it, and you might have a pretty good amaretto. Some of the other recipes, as Daniel said, they're all being used for macaroons, such as in Enureclos, try and find it, rhodonite. And Juice Fairy actually used it in a run chatter as FA Almond with a little bit of FA Marzipan and some FA Coconut to actually boost the creaminess from TFA horchata. And that's pretty much it for me. I can't really think of any other uses. I do agree with Theo. I'd use it from 0.5 to 2%, unless you're a super taster.
Mm. Yeah, Deets, you have this one, right?
Yes, I do. I have it. So basically, I have it around and I've not actually mixed it. What I bought it for, I can at least say what I bought it for, and that was vanilla almond milk by Verve. I did buy it recently in my defense, and I've been mixing a lot of things. So this is still in my to mix list. So maybe we can recap on a follow-up episode, and I'll put my notes in.
That incidentally is one of the best recipes that uses it. Vanilla almond milk is just stunning. Can I ask you guys, there are two schools of thought on FA almond. One says it's almond essence. The other says it's almond paste. Which are you guys getting? I get paste from it.
I get the almond paste as well.
I don't move in circles where that's a problem, you know what I mean? Like, I have to still try those two things. I just eat the almond nut, you know what I mean? Like, I just eat the nut, and that's all.
So you in your mouth, right?
Yeah, I eat it, and then no paste, and yeah.
I find the same with this as with FW hazelnut. It's like you took a blender and you just filled it with almonds and you just scrunched them up into this sort of gooey hummus type paste. That's kind of the dominant thing that I get from it. But a lot of people say they just get essence. They don't really get texture from it. They just get the taste of, the Moyes almond essence that you would use it in bakery. But I get a very clear texture.
Yeah, I think that the texture that I'm getting at 2% is, some creaminess and a little bit of body to it. And I think, if I think about it now, what you're talking about is pretty much that. You know what I mean? That experience for you is like a pasty experience.
Yeah, it's like creaminess and fattiness, but in a kind of sticky way. You can imagine it sticking to your mouth if you were eating it. So I don't know. That's just my experience with.
I think it's definitely in that line. Like if I think on bakery, I'm not thinking as in like essence as being added to bakery, but more actual almonds like being ground up into the flour or almond flour. It's a lot closer to that flavor to me than it would be to an essence, where essence also got a bit of like alcoholic note to it from the alcohol in there.
Yeah. Guys, is there anything more that we need to add though?
One thing we haven't actually touched on is I actually find it quite sweet. A lot sweeter than just a raw almond would actually be. So it is pretty much the paste, but with a tiny bit of sugar or sweetener added to it. Just nowhere near marzipan levels, though. Nowhere near that, but there is a little bit of sweetness there.
100%, yeah, it's very sweet. It's very, very sweet.
That marzipan recipe, is it the Juice Fairy, right? That has it. That's quite interesting because marzipan, like cooked almonds, you could not very almond forward like the marzipan ones that I've used. So something like FA has got a bit of a cherry note to it, and then I get a bit of like a syrupy note with Inuera, where I actually see that almond working very well with something like marzipan to even create a nougat. Like then you mix it with nougat, marzipan, almond, and you get a pretty good like almond nougat.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Cool, guys.
Shout out to Jennifer for that tip on separation.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm definitely going to be using that. It's because I find a lot of the cheesecake recipes that's got the topping on top, that jammy topping on top, there's no separation, or there's little separation. The things are bleeding into each other. Where, when you eat that kind of cheesecake, you almost want that separation. And then ultimately, you know, in your mouth, it ends up to be blended, of course, but the initial experience is quite separated. So that might work there.
See it as like on a frosted cupcake, right?
Mm.
So you want that separation where you taste the frosting and the vanilla, but generally when I mix something up that I want to make like a vanilla frosting, I get a very like blended vanilla cupcake where you could create that separation where it's a lot more realistic.
Cool, yeah. So this is definitely a must-have, especially if you know, into your bakeries, I think, or if you looking at. So from a bakery perspective, just as a straight-up almond, and you know, you can also use it to sweeten up, you know, to add some sweetness to the recipe as well. It inherently has a little bit of creaminess to it, so just be aware of that. And then, yeah, that separation. So there's many uses for it. So must have for the stash, especially if you're doing bakeries. I think many bakeries are topped off with almonds, and you know, this is definitely something that can give you that idea of that flakiness or that flaky almond at the top. Cool, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Please have a look at the description below. I'm going to be adding Liam's ATF in there. You're used to ours in there, but I'm going to be adding Liam's in there. So have a look at that. We also have, you know, links to our collaboration one-shot as well. So go and have a look at that, guys. But thank you very much for watching. So cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks all.
Cheers.